Thanks very much for having me. While contemplating the topic of this gathering, it occurred to me that it boils down to a very simple question. How can we get every European, ideally every citizen on the planet, to ask themselves two questions? Why am I here? And what can I do? And then do it. The first question is an old one, of course, one that has been debated for thousands of years and will continue to be contemplated for as long as we humans are here. The second one is not new either, but my concern is that only a small minority is asking it, and in this time we need a large majority to ask it, simply because we are now determining the future of the planet. We find ourselves in the midst of a global transformation not witnessed since the Industrial Revolution, a world at crossroads. We're now so powerful we could destroy ourselves or flourish sustainably. Unlike previous generations, we have all the information at our fingertips. It is impossible not to know what happens in other parts of the world and to the world as a whole. Yet, this fundamental shift in interconnectedness seems not to have translated into a fundamental shift in collective perception and action yet, that would lead people to ask themselves, what can I do? And then do it. If we are to move forward rather than backward or outward, we'll need to, as Martin Novak puts it, harness the creative power of cooperation in novel ways. And there is hope. According to one of his recent studies, democratic voting emerges as the most promising tool. But it will have to evolve from national to global levels. Imagine a global vote on global problems. When we think about the future, one of the eminent questions is, what kind of world will we pass on to those who follow us? Are we willing to make sacrifices so future generations are also able to meet their needs? Traditionally, it's been assumed that people are rational and purely self-interested. Under this assumption, the future of the planet would look dire. However, in recent years, a large body of evidence has demonstrated that many people are not purely selfish. In fact, they're willing to share resources with future generations under two conditions. First, the decision has to be based on voting and not individually. And second, the vote must be binding. In short, there is scientific evidence that democratic voting is the solution to overcoming global challenges such as environmental problems. And for anyone who wants to know more on this, I have that study here. Now, let me share how I see artists coming into that picture. In other words, how can artists support this process of evolving democracy and participation, which is essential to the larger transformative process towards sustainability? I've been exploring this question with a number of other artists for years, and we have recently published our first report. So let me share what we have found. As most of you here certainly know, traditionally the art system has been divided into high arts and community arts. The high arts are enjoyed by mostly highly educated audiences within temples of high cultures such as opera houses, concert halls, and theaters. High art has become a comfortable and pleasant pastime which provides opportunities to reflect on life, evoking familiar emotions, and engaging audiences in playful and intellectual exercises. It has its value, and it occupies a stable place in society, often affirming belief systems already in place. Meanwhile, community art, in a nutshell, is art for impact. While innovation is not a focus, it directly engages with societal problems and people, and has secured a stable place in the art system. And just to be clear, we're not criticizing this. Both have conquered their place with good reason. But who is addressing the scary and the unknown? We have observed that a growing number of artists are challenging art forms and moving away from traditional spaces and audiences to better engage with complex challenges. As engaged citizens, they are eager to take on the burning question of our time. How might we, as a global community, make a transformation to a sustainable lifestyle? This has led us to what we defined as constructive art. So let me first outline what constructive art is not. It doesn't just illustrate a topic and reflect on a problem, as is in the case within the traditional art system. And it doesn't only engage people in art because art is good for them. And just to be clear again, both are good and have their place and they're fine. And constructive art also doesn't, as in the case of activist art, advocate a particular point of view. Constructive art aims to combine innovation and impact. It poses original questions that open up avenues for inquiry. It aims to change perceptions. It aims to break negative patterns of behavior. It promotes new ways of relating to humans and non-humans. It engages with real-life problems through the artistic process. It breaks the traditional separation between autonomous and applied art to make room for a novel approach where artists create autonomous spaces within the context of current global challenges. It tends to be disruptive and unconventional, but it is always strongly connected to contemporary society and concerned with making positive change. One could say it couples freedom and responsibility. And as such, it mirrors the fundamentals of a healthy democracy. While the methodologies used in constructive art vary, we have identified two main approaches. Research-based art that engages with science and contributes to the discourse on global challenges and envisions practical solutions, and you will see a practical example of that in a minute. I'm done with theory soon. And second, research-based art that engages with communities, experts, or other professionals to derive new insight about societal issues. And within those two approaches, we were able to identify 5 hallmarks that define constructive art, that distinguish it from existing art forms. They are social relevance, investigation, process, constructive output, and media engagement, and sustainable post-production. And for anyone who really wants to know more, I have the report here and you can read about it, so I'll just briefly go over the 5 to just outline what we mean and what we found. So by social relevance, we mean that similar to constructive journalism actually, constructive art engages with social, economic and environmental issues that are urgent, complex and global in scope. And these artworks exemplify problems that affect not only individuals, but entire societies and have the potential to shape the lives of generations to come. So that is new. Second, investigation. Here we found that, like science, constructive art engages in a research process, and this process typically involves consulting with relevant stakeholders such as communities and experts from other fields who can contribute first-hand knowledge about a given issue. And this knowledge goes beyond the rational and the physical phenomena and uncovers emotional, subjective, and experiential insights that can lead to greater understanding and barriers to change. Third process, here we observe that traditionally arts productions tend to be performance and product oriented. In other words, for artists, the performance is the goal. And when creating constructive artworks, process and product are equally important. So artists typically engage with experts from other fields, as already mentioned, and stakeholders in the creation process, and that generates spillover effects as a consequence, because as soon as people from different fields work together, they also learn from each other and derive new insights. The creation process typically bridges the fields of art and science, but also welcomes knowledge based on experience, for instance, the traditional knowledge of indigenous people, in order to gain new insights for everyone. Fourth, second to last. For constructive output, we observed that the results, whether it is a performance or another form of artistic presentation, is constructive. So it doesn't just illustrate or communicate a message. It opens up awareness of exploration to prepare the ground for constructive long-term solutions. And unlike activism, again, it does not propose immediate solutions. Finally, in terms of media engagement, traditionally media engagement is limited to press releases, performances, and at best interviews. But the nature of the constructive research process opens up new possibilities for journalists and stakeholders to engage with artists on a collaborative level. So artists and those involved in the process, for instance, share their the insights they gain with journalists on a more horizontal level. And where such collaborations are not yet in place, artists disseminate their work through non-traditional channels themselves, so they share their artworks or performances on social media, partner with non-arts organizations to reach non-traditional audiences, and create educational campaigns to extend the reach of their work. Now, all of this may sound very theoretical, so I brought along an example of a recent work that was created alongside these parameters. The story behind is that I was asked last December to create a new work for the political symposium of the European Forum Alpbach, and the topic was conflict and cooperation. So the first thing that came to my mind was that there's a science to conflict and cooperation, which is called game theory. And after thinking about the topic, while observing current affairs for a couple of weeks, I spoke to our game theorists and said something like this. I think game theory is a really valuable concept, and I wish more people were able to understand it. It is such a useful lens to look at the world and understand what is going on right now and what the options are, be it Brexit, the Paris Climate Agreement, or the nuclear rearming. Perhaps if we try to fusion game theory with an artistic process, we can breathe life into that theory. And 7 months later, we ended up with this, which was in August. In order to solve the global challenges we face, our species will have to evolve into super cooperators. Game theory provides insights into the dynamics of human behavior, and with this dance-science collaboration in Dilemma, we are exploring what kind of balance between conflict and cooperation may help us get there.
I'm an old scientist and have nothing at all to do with dancing, actually. But when I got the opportunity of joining this project, I grabbed it because I thought that from time to time, everybody should make something crazy. But at the end of it, I found that it wasn't crazy at all. It made a lot of sense.
It is so inspiring, be in this free flow of ideas, of creativity. We all learn from each other, we create something better, we improve on each other's ideas.
I feel thrilled to be part of this project and show the world the possibilities how dance can have a greater impact on society.
You will see here a premiere of a collaboration which I think is unprecedented. Collaboration where world-leading scientists in game theories like Carl Sigmund and Piotr Magnuszewski will be on stage together with world-leading dancers thinking about both arts and sustainability.
4 anonymous players sit in a game lab.
In the nature of men, we find 3 principal causes of quarrel. First, competition. Second, diffidence. Third, glory. The first makes men invade for gain. The second, for safety. The third, for reputation. There is always war of everyone against everyone. And the life of man, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. There is conflict whenever there is life. Conflict in every society, every family, every soul. If there were no conflicts of interest, we would need no morals. We could do without law. Without contracts and allies, all rules and regulations serve merely to tame conflicts of interest. Mathematicians were late in addressing this topic. They turned first to space and numbers, to symmetries and probabilities. But now we have mathematics of conflicts of interest. It is called game theory. Game theory, even though it deals with the most serious matters on earth. Just as probability theory grew from games of chance and is used today to describe the physical world, game theory took over terms from poker and chess. Terms such as strategy, player, move, and payoff to describe social interactions. Huge amounts of matter, energy, and information circulate around the globe in a fast-moving flow propelled by human interactions. These interactions are part of human behaviors, which are based on human preferences, which happen not to be aligned. Alas, or thank God. And that's what game theory is all about. It deals with sharing and commitment, with trust and threat, and risk and reputation, with partnership and rivalry, to avoid the war of everyone against everyone. 4 anonymous players sit in their cubicles in a game lab. If player A does not contribute, and B, C, and D do, then the common pool consists of 60 euros. Each of the 3 players 10 euros being doubled by the experimenter. And A receives 15 euros from it. This is a greater gain than 10 euros. However, while A is doing better, the others are doing worse. This is a social trap. It works like a mousetrap. The cheese is your self-interest. The spring is other people's self-interest. Free riders race each other, and the finishing line of that stampede of self-interest is economic standstill. In real life, as opposed to the game, free riders are punished if they are caught. Punishment is costly, nevertheless it works. Some people anticipate the punishment and strike first. Our harmless public good game quickly turns into a war of everyone against everyone. We need a social contract. All his life, man is imprisoned by his institutions. Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains. He runs to meet his chains, thinking they secure his freedom. Ethics, our only hope to beat social dilemmas, tragedies of the commons, and the war of everyone against everyone.
It is time to come back to our dramatic situation. Our world is almost destroyed. Can you restore it? Or will it collapse? You stay in your roles, and you can still express that you need more life space by standing up, or you can express that you have enough by sitting down. But this time, we add another possibility. You can also give, share to your neighbors. You express it by standing up and raising your hand like this. Now, you have three choices, and let's continue our journey into the future.
This was obviously a summary. This was trying to summarize in 7 minutes what happened in roughly half an hour. So the constructive art challenge there was innovation plus impact. And of course the innovative part there was to say that can I work with game theories, and can we breathe life into game theory, and can we give it a new form? And that was the safe part, because we knew we could put this on stage and it would be new, and would definitely have a form it never had before. But I then thought about it, and I feared that if people just going to go and sit there and see this, and this was a political symposium, so already we had a non-arts audience there and a lot of decision makers, but still, people would sit there and say, oh, this is really interesting, and now I understand game theory, and then they walk home and nothing changes. So that's why I worked with another game, the one theorist who was actually on stage with us, who then developed this game that we would really push people to make those decisions and say, well, are we, do you have enough? And we had these different groups. One was representing the poor people in poor countries, poor people in rich countries, innovators, like sort of the Silicon Valley type of people, and the super rich people. And they were all divided. And that was actually, it started with the game. And basically, we set it up in a way that people would mess up the world first and destroy the environment. And then we showed the game theory, and then we asked them what you could see at the end, that they had a third option. And everyone was sharing in the end. So, yeah, that's a little bit more information on how we were there, also experimenting with participation and thinking about how can we actually get people to really walk away from this and feel like they're part of this. This wasn't just information. Yeah, so much about the piece. What I'd also like to share is that there are increasingly, as I mentioned before, artists who are trying to work along those parameters, but it's really hard. Because basically the moment that you're trying to bridge disciplines, you don't fit into a box anymore, and then where is the money coming from? That's always the big problem. So I'm very lucky to be in this environment where I can really innovate. And it's all about, what can you do? And then if the idea is good, I can do it. But I have, for instance, a colleague who is a playwright in Canada, and she's Canadian, she lives in the US, and she's been doing fantastic work on climate change for 15 years, and she is getting places, but she's struggling, still struggling. And one day I asked her, so why is it? Why is it so hard? And she said, well, the arts world doesn't like me because I'm trying to actually work with a real world issue. And then the science world doesn't really like me because I'm an artist. And so that's, of course, what we are facing here. And then also interestingly in the policy world, there is increasing interest to have artists in conference and things, but usually just as decoration and not as part of the discourse. And I'm not pointing the fingers at the policy world because I think that as artists we have our own, there's reasons why we are ending up in that decorative place. But it's time to change it. And we are moving forward. So for instance, in this political symposium, we were part of the symposium. We were not the Rahmenprogramm, and we were listed as lecturers, even though we weren't actually speaking, but we spoke with our bodies. But just so to summarize, why isn't this happening more? And this is also why we came out with this report, because we really tried now to point our things and look, there is something new happening, and we have to document it. But basically, we are facing systemic challenges and structural challenges. So the systemic challenges in a way is that, of course, the existing art system also wants to protect its territory, right? So why is all the money going to classical music and opera? And, the people who have the money there, they want to keep it. So they will not really welcome artists who want to do something new. So, and that's always the case with everything. But I mean, it's clear that that's a systemic problem. And then the policy world is kind of thinking, oh, artists could be marketing tools. And then the science world, with a few exceptions, thinks that artists are a parallel universe, but it's changing. So I'm just trying to analyze what the problems there are. But I am hopeful that we can move forward. And then the structural problem, I think in the culture funding world is really that just how artists can even fund their ideas. And I just have a few suggestions of what I think should change. And that is first, when artists want to engage with current affairs, I mean, it's happening now, they want to respond immediately and work on it, or sometimes even anticipate something that is sort of starting to happen but will become an issue in a half year. So when I'm making something, I can actually go and do, like this project was realized within 7 months. But in the arts world, that's not possible because you have to make the grant applications. I mean, you all know this. And then 2 years later, you might get more money, but actually the issue is gone, and you couldn't do anything about it. So I think we need smaller grants and a faster process. And then if, for artists to engage really with current affairs. And then if that first work works, then there should be a longer term project so that it's not a one-off thing, which is the other problem, that it's a lot of one-offs. And so that if something works, then there's a long-term 2-year, 3-year commitment to fund an artist to really dig in deeper. Yeah, and the other thing I maybe should mention is that the current criteria and grant writing framework is basically an innovator's hell. Because basically, if you comply with existing criteria, it's very difficult to create something new. Yeah. So to conclude, I started with 2 very big questions that I believe citizens need to ask themselves, since for better or worse, we are now powerful enough to determine the future of the planet. Why am I here and what can I do? And I shared what artists can do, what I think artists can do to strengthen this new sense of responsibility and global consciousness. And now, for artists to fulfill their potential in supporting this transformation, we would need these with the mandate to fund artists to simply ask them 2 questions. What can you do? And what do you need? And if it is good, do it. That's it. Thank you.